Dear colleagues, it is time to begin our conference. As you understand, the conference, at least today, is going to be held in English, the same as tomorrow. Let me introduce myself. My name is Alexey Konobeiev. I'm the academic director at Skyeng, and I am one of the organizers of this conference in the sense that I will be moderating track 1 of the conference. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce today's speakers of track 1. And also, I would like to tell you about your chance to win a copy of a textbook. And free textbooks are always welcome. So let me say a few words about today's speakers, and then just 1 or 2 sentences about how our track is going to be organized. Our first speaker, Athanasios Karasimos, holds his doctoral degree in computational linguistics, and he is well known for dozens of articles, as well as his work with the Academy of Athens, with Aristotle University of Thessaloniki, and with Hellenic Open University in Greece. Our next speaker, Dr. Thomai Alexiou, is an associate professor at the Department of Theoretical and Applied Linguistics, School of English, at Aristotle University of Thessaloniki in Greece. She has published widely in the area of second language acquisition pedagogy and in the field of materials development. She has also authored and co-authored books and online resources in the areas of content and language integrated learning, in the areas of strategy, dyslexia, Greek as a second language, and English as a foreign language for young learners. And one of the books, A Magic Book 2, has been shortlisted for Macmillan Education Award for New Talent in Writing. And Daria Grits is director for work with universities at Skill Factory, and she is very well known across Russia for her previous work with Skyeng and for many, many other things that she has been doing in many programs. Now, as for the organization of our talk, since you are watching online and most of you are watching by YouTube, please feel free to post your comments and questions in the chat. At the end of each speaker's presentation, we will be able to ask those questions and to tell about those comments to the speaker, so you will have a chance to get your answers. And one more thing about the raffle that I mentioned. If you take a look at your screens, you will see that there is a link to a Google Doc right underneath the screen in which you currently see me. What I'd like you to do is this. I would like you to follow this link, fill it in with your first name, your patronymic, and your surname, and the name of the university. And at the end of the conference, we're going to hold a raffle. We're going to use a generator of random numbers, and it will help us to choose 3 persons who will have a present, who will get a present from us, a printed textbook, Skylike, which is a brand new textbook. And we're going to hear today the authors of this textbook. Okay, so basically this was it. And I'd like to give word to Dr. Athanasios Karasimos, our first speaker.
Hi, everyone. Let me start sharing my presentation. Okay, today's presentation is about introducing board games in your field classroom. It's going to be a beginner's guide for this new feature. So the outline of my presentation is going to be the following. After a short introduction, I'm going to present you the field context. I have created some selection criteria of board games for EFL purposes, based, of course, on specific types of board games in their higher education classroom. And at the end, it's going to be the more practical part of my presentation. Let's get started about using the board games in a classroom. I'm going to provide you some scenarios, some specific kind of template that can be used. And at the end, it's going to be some conclusions. Now, if we try to use a specific kind of theory in board game, it's going to be the game-based learning and teaching theory, which is a theoretical approach and framework that has been measured learning outcomes based on gaming and learning procedures, of course. Generally speaking, this kind of framework is focused on balance informations with gameplay and the ability of each learner to retain and put on this to subject to the realistic situation. So moving from this framework to the most common framework, which is the gamification, which is well known, one obtains a different kind of learning experience. The gamification process transfers dominant gaming features. Most of them has been transferred from specific kind of gaming platforms like the Steam, the Origin, the Uplay, and these kind of features are such as experience points, achievements, user badges, challenges, leaderboards, progress bars, etc. So when trying to use this kind of dominant feature in a non-game environment is the most specific way to use the gamification in our case. And it's quite popular in the industry, in the organizations, even in universities and research centers. So its major advantage is to turn the boredom and the routine and the uninspired tasks into something different, into an innovative, challenging, and interesting experience. So when you try to use this kind of gamification in gaming theory, preparation is the key to success and failure. So we strongly underline that the teacher should not forget to apply the criterion, the selection criteria I'm going to present in a few slides carefully, because even there are many of them that are crucial for the success in the classroom. So gamification might reveal some teaching weaknesses and frustrated situation when someone fails to fulfill the gaming objective, which is also something really important when trying to use board games or video games in a classroom. As opposed to video games, the good thing about board games is that the teacher can actually manipulate either the board game time, the rules, and the stressful issues. So the board games affect teacher talking time by shifting them and focus on the young learners or the adults' interaction and their discussion in the FL classroom. Just a small comment about a term that I'm going to use, which is the meeple. I think most of you do not know this kind of term. Meeple is a playing piece used in board games to represent a player, kind of like a pawn. And at the beginning of the board games, usually these kind of meeples looking just as people. But now they can be animals, they can be robots, they can be trains, they can be cars, they can be actually anything. And meeple is a blend created from my and people. And it was created during a specific kind of session in the board game Cascaron by Alison Hansel. Now, nowadays, when talk about meeple, is all these wooden or plastic or even metal tokens inside the board game. So which are the benefits of using board games in the FL classroom? Video and board games are often a decent solution for the teacher to create some active and creative learning. So Martinson and Chu actually claim that games are an effective tool, games are effective tools for learning because they are often students a hypothetical environment in which they can explore alternative decisions without the risk of failure. And Forman also supports that learning through performance requires active discovery, analysis, interpretation, problem solving, memory and physical activity, and extensive cognitive processing. And all these kind of issues can actually be part of a board game session. Additionally, Alexiou claims that certain cognitive skills like this, memory, reasoning ability, inductive learning, visual perception, etc., are linked with foreign language aptitude and can actually facilitate foreign language learning. So the enjoyment of board game highlights aspects of sociality, intellectual challenge, variety, and materiality. And Rogerson, Gibson, Smith actually say that more specifically, specific kind of board game modes like cooperation, competition, and social interaction are main drivers of user experience in board game play and the general hobby involved. So when you try to decide which kind of games you are going to use in FL, have to apply some specific criteria, specific criteria. So I decided to create a group of specific criteria that can always be part of our decision. The basic selection criteria when are 5, but the 3 of them, the age, the duration, and the group, are always outside of any box of a board game. So age should be part of our decision because have to fulfill the minimum age suggestion by the designers and the publishers. But when decided to discuss about high educational classroom, there is no case to find a board game that is not proper for our students. The duration is the time factor, which is an essential for a classroom, because we can have board games that can actually be playing session for 10 to 20 minutes, but in some cases can be 2, 3, or even 6 hours. Or there are specific kind of board games that have campaigns, and this kind of board games can actually end after a 10 or 20-hour sessions. And the third group that is outside of a board game group box is the group, which is actually a crucial factor for a normal play, but for a teaching and learning play, it can be easily modified. For example, if they say that is a board game for 2 to 6 players, we can actually say that is for 2 to 6 groups of players when you try to actually use it in a classroom. The other two really basic and important criteria is the level of difficulty and the rating. The level of difficulty has to do with the hardest criteria, and it's based on objective perspective. So we strongly recommend to avoid any type of game that is medium or high difficulty, and which is a case which can be actually increase dramatically the complexity of the lesson and the danger of students feeling unconfident, discouraged, or overwhelmed. And this is quite crucial when you have students or teachers that quite inexperienced or novice in the area of board gaming. And the fifth one is the rating. It's a criteria that can easily help the teacher to discard board games from a huge list. For example, if you're going to visit Board Game Geek, which is the biggest database about board games, it contains more than 100,000 board games. So you can understand that the rating can be crucial when you try to discard some board games from this kind of huge lists. The second group of criteria is the language factor, which is actually crucial for all cases. So the first one is language dependency, density of language, and language and game content. Language dependence has to do with teaching people that have little or no knowledge in other languages. So it is actually not easy to find a non-English or a non-German or a non-French version of a board game. The second one has to do about the density of the language. So when you try to modify the current criterion from video viewing, we can actually apply this criterion in a board game and say that the amount of language spoken and written over the play of a particular board game is the most significant for language teaching and learning case. And the third one has to do about the language and the game content. When I say about language content, means the language item, the grammatical structure, the collocation expression, the repetition of specific kind of language features, etc. So when you try to apply this criterion, you have to keep in mind that the language content is a very important factor because affects the comprehensibility. The teacher should find which linguistic items are presented in the board game that he or she like to use, and try to remember that that the modern board games do not have this kind of simple rule books that use like the Monopoly, the old-fashioned board games, like 2 or 4 pages of rules. Some of the modern board games, they can have actually 20, 30, or 40 pages of rules, and because they have plenty of text also, they have also some lore about the story, about everything. So it's quite crucial to be careful choosing this kind of criterion. And the third group of selection criteria is the secondary selection criteria. The first one is the theme factor. The teacher should select a board game which does not contain any political, religious, ethical, or sexual messages which is relevant to the student's cultural background. What kind of selection, because someone may be feeling quite uncomfortable in a classroom. So also, less amount is easier to comprehend. I have to be very careful about the amount of information, the amount of language, the number of rules, the amount of time that can be actually a real nightmare for a board game session in a classroom. We have to try to find the balance between all this kind of information. The third one is the supporting material. Unfortunately, the community does not have already created so many material using board games in a classroom. Nevertheless, if you visit this Board Game Geek database, you're going to find for specific kind of board games some material that can be used in our cases. The fourth one is authenticity, and I have decided to include authenticity for board game criteria since they proved the strong connection with flexibility, significant language items, and lexis, which I think is quite important in our case. And the last part is the fun factor. Do not forget that we play board games for fun, and when trying to include them in our teaching and learning situation, there should be also a fun factor for our students so they can be motivated and learn more easily. So which are the types of games that can be used? The expert gamers are related with the video games criteria. Unfortunately, or on the contrary, the video games genres, movies and TV series, literature are specific and concrete and are not dateable or questionable to their categories. In our case, in the board games, unfortunately, we try to borrow and transfer this criteria, generated more issues and problems that solve in a board game classification system. And actually, in most of the cases, the designers and the publishers have different kind of criteria if we try to compare with the reviewers and the gamers. So I decided to create or to present a more specific, concrete classification system that can be actually used for the teachers, from the educators, without many problems. We have the abstract strategy board games. These games have been around for a long time, have been played continuously by most every culture in the world. We can have games like Risk or chess, and more advanced games like successors in the modern board games. The mainstream and family games. These games are more an old school type of tabletop games and are made for the mass audience, like Taboo, like Monopoly, like Trivial Pursuit. All this kind of old-fashioned board games are in this kind of category. The dice and be lucky games are that use or incorporate one or more dice as their sole or central component, and usually as a random device. So it's a quite easy category to be used in our cases. And dexterity is the group of board games that have an element of dexterity to them, like the Operation, Hungry, Hypos, or Jenga, which does not contain too much thought about our choices. And now the rest of the categories are based on mostly in the modern board games. The role-playing games has been actually sitting at the top of the board game hierarchy for some time. Is the most advanced case of board games categories, since it contains huge rule books. You can play for hours, and it has plenty of meeples in this kind of case. War games and wargaming, this is a board game category of games that use war and conquest as an overall theme. Thematic games focus strongly on a specific theme. This theme is usually explored with a lot of depth, and it has any kind of scientific and non-scientific categories, including in this area, like maths, like physics, like the electricity, like economics, like management, like anything. Eurogames stand somehow in contrast to thematic games, which are seen as more American take or hobby board games, regardless of whether a specific thematic game has made in America or not. So do not be confused from the Europe part of this category. And the last one is worker placement games, where actually players will have a pool of meeples that represent the workers available to them. And before I finish with this part of the categories, I want to present you the power of cooperation or cooperative board games. I strongly believe that the ideal mode is definitely the cooperative one, since it offers a smooth and easygoing playing and learning environment, and competitiveness is out of the border. Also, cooperation strengthens the relation connection between educator and student, but also this playful learning has cognitive and metacognitive benefits for them. Also, with cooperative board games, the players acquire social skills such as oral communication and sharing, especially in co-op mode. And if we try to use a well-known framework like the Montessori-like case to have the elder preschoolers play a few of these board games with the younger ones, so we can use this kind of theory for the adults when the experienced students can actually learn to work with people with different ages and inexperienced and novice level of board gaming learning situation. So let's get started. Let's try to apply all this theory in a classroom. I've created some specific steps when you try to create a lesson plan based on our board game. First of all, I have to choose your topic, your theme, or your scientific area, like maths, like physics, like language, something that can be actually used in your classroom. Then you have to choose, a proper board game gender, the gender that you are going to feel more comfortable using all this kind of theory. Then is the most crucial part. Have to be sure that you are going to decide the proper board game for your lesson plan. After this kind of decision, you have to read the rules and play session, which is really important to understand how the rules are applied in a playing session. And after this playing session, you have to read again the rule book to be sure that you have actually understand properly the rules and how you can bend its rules. Because bending its rules is really important. When you try to use a board game in a classroom, always you're going to try to bend some rules because you try to make the game more easier. You try to game more applicable in a classroom. And then it's time to question your choice, to be sure that after all this reading, after all this playing session and this rule bending part, have to be sure that you have decided correctly, that your decision for this kind of board game is correct. You have to stick on it. And also have to consider if you can replace this board game with another one that can actually support the co-op mode if your choice does not. Because I always say that the cooperation mode is always a friend in a classroom. And finally, it's time to build a rough lesson plan. So I provide you a proposed template for this board games teaching. You have to decide in which level of English proficiency or any language proficiency you're going to target, the age range for your students, that is in most of the cases, there's not going to be any problem. The number of the players, because you have to decide in which groups you are going to divide your classroom, the rating and the level of difficulty of your board game, the prerequisites that are necessary to build your lesson plan, the time duration, not based on the box of the board game, but your in actual experience, you only try to bend the rules. The subject area, if it's applicable, the type of the game, and then we can have some specific on aims, linguistic aims, cognitive aims, and pedagogical aims. And also have to reconsider about what kind of material are you going to use to support the board gaming session. And have to make some description for your activities that you are going to use for this kind of lesson plan. Describe the process, and if there is some variation and alternative, this is the case scenario when you're not sure that everything is going to be okay and you have to bend something in your lesson. So I'm going to present you some scenarios that are already applied for my students. The first one is using Unlock. Unlock is an escape board game. My learning targets were speaking, reading, and listening skills. The aims, the pedagogical aims was cooperation, creativity, and imagination. And the cognitive aims was problem solving, associative memory, and reasoning. And in this kind of case, I use the scenario of the island of Dr. Goose. The players has been crushed in a collector's island. So there has been split into different teams based on the scenario, and they should find a way to solve the riddles and find also a way to communicate between the groups, which is really important. So during the game, the group hears some audio from a broken vinyl records via an application. You can see that in the top right corner. And they must find a way to transform this audio information in the card text. So my students were really excited playing this kind of game. And when I try to manipulate the rules, there is an actually button to give a time penalty if you have to do something wrong when trying to solve a riddle. So I use this time button penalty when they do not use English. For example, in our case, they used Greek to communicate during the board game session. Another case is Mysterium. Mysterium is an interesting game because it's also a cooperative game. From one part, there is the ghost. The ghost actually does not talk at all during the board game session. I think it's the ideal scenario for the teacher because he can be the ghost, providing some vision to the players. Each player should identify the suspect, the murder location, and the item. And the investigator players should talk and discuss their decision with the group to select the right suspect location item card. And also, they have to justify if they agree or disagree with each player's decision. So there's going to be a lot of discussion between them. They have to make some discourse analysis, which is really important. And another scenario is the third one. I have tried to create a board game for my students in the computational linguistic module. I was trying at the end of the semester to recap all the theory about computational linguistics. So I created a computational linguistic odyssey based on the famous 2001 Space Odyssey of Kubrick and Clark. So my aim was to recap the computational linguistic module. So it was based on problem solving, associative memory, inductive learning ability. In my case, I have created a stupid machine called Mihaela 9000, which is an artificial intelligence. And in case to trying to patch this kind of machine, they were trying to solve some specific computational, linguistic, and natural language processing riddles and activities. All, of course, it was connected with a story. And to conclude, it is actually fascinating to see the learning process at work with youngsters and adults. There is an air of excitement about what happens in the classroom. So students produce spontaneous responses and build confidence because they do not spend too much time thinking about what to say, which is really important in our case. So an answer just come out of them. And sometimes it is right, sometimes it is not, which is okay. And built-in board game scenarios in ELT, it targets the motivation and excitement about what happens on the classroom. So all the genres are appropriate for language teaching and learning, definitely. However, I believe that thematic games and Euro games are most likely to provide more easily effective material, tasks, and exercises. And of course, the ideal is using this kind of categories in cooperation mode. Thank you. I refer you to this kind of page because there is also a riddle, as you can see, based on one of the board games.
Okay, thank you so much. While you were presenting, there was an ongoing online discussion in the chat, and there were some people who were saying that games are mainly for young children, but most seem to be to agree that students at
Yes.
university level enjoy playing games very, very much. We got a few questions though. One of the first question was, how can we manage to use a board game online during distance learning? Is there anything you can recommend?
Okay. Actually, there are two platforms. The first one is the board game arena, and the other one is the tabletop Steam platform. You can actually use in a virtual environment any board game that you like. And also it's more cheap because you don't have to buy the physical copy of the board, and you can give access to any of your students. So you create some specific kind of board game sessions in a virtual environment. The first one is the board game arena, and the second one is the tabletop simulator in the Steam. And in other cases, there is plenty of print and play board games in the Board Game Geek database. You can provide these PDF files to your students. They can actually print them, and you can guide them through the distance learning procedure or lecture, how to do and to create all the necessary conditions to finish the board game session.
Okay, thank you very much. And that actually answers the second question that we got, which was, is it wholly virtual or blended? And I think that was about it.
Depends on the type. Nowadays, many of the publishers try to present also the physical copies of the board games in a digital form. The most dominant publisher, Asmodee, is actually publishing the 70% of their board games in Steam as a digital copy. And some of the physical board games actually require also an application. For example, Unlock, as told you, it's a card game, but you have to use also the applications, because there is the part where you can upload your passwords, you can take some hints, you can actually use some machines. This is the way that is called by the company. And also in some of the RPGs board games, there is also this kind of application who is going to read you the story, to give you some music, to try to feel you more motivated or scared during the board game session. So actually, it can be actually virtual, blended, or just a physical session with the board game.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. And to finish off your presentation, I'd like to read out one comment, which is there on YouTube. Irina Tura writes, "Thank you. I've never thought gaming is so helpful and exciting." And I think this is a very, very wonderful comment.
If you didn't find the solution of this riddle, the 1st of January, it refers to the characters, not the time. So the 1st of January is J, the 4th is O, the 5th of March is H, and the 3rd is N. So it's John. You can see how you can easily create some linguistic riddles in a board game sessions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. This was our first speaker of track 1, Dr. Athanasios Karasimos. And now the floor goes to Dr. Thomai Alexiou, Associate Professor at the Department of Theoretical and Applied Linguistics. I'm repeating all the titles once again for those who are joining us a bit later than the beginning of the conference. And Dr. Thomai Alexiou works at Aristotle University of Thessaloniki in Greece, and she's the author and co-author of a number of textbooks, both for older and for young learners. Another speaker is Daria Grits, Director for Work with Universities at Skill Factory and former Director at Skyeng. Okay, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, your mic is off.
I'm so sorry. This is a common thing. I always do this. I don't know why. Anyway, thank you very much for all your kind words, and I'm really delighted to be here today. Daria is going to start with a couple of words about the book and the process and how we ended up with this product. And then I'm going to talk to you about the research behind it. Daria, are you there?
Yeah, hi. Hi, everyone. Thank you for giving me the floor. I will begin with a very, very short introduction. I promise to be brief. And I have just 2 slides. Okay, hope you can see them. So I'd like to start by saying a few words about our team, because we had a very large team. You will hear about the results of our work later on, but I'd like to emphasize that we had 10 people from 5 different countries working on this project. And I cannot say that it was easy to build a cross-cultural team to work on such a project. And also, all of us worked remotely. And saw each other a couple of times, so we were not together all the time physically, which also added to the complexity of this project. But still, so this is me. I was already introduced, so I'm going to skip this part. So I'd like to say about 3 things that I believe were success factors in this project. And on the right, you can see in the picture, there's a book that's Sky-like. And there's a picture of 5 characters. This is, I put this picture there because I was in charge not only of managing the team, but I was also in charge of working with the designer. And that was difficult for me because that's not the kind of expertise that I actually have, but we managed. And this is why I put this picture here. So speaking of success factors, the first one, I think it's key. The key is to be straightforward, and it's not very easy when you work with, very successful people who have a lot of victories, under their belts, and who hold, degrees and have titles, and it's sometimes. It was difficult for us as well. It was difficult for me because I didn't know Thomai at the beginning. We just met when we started working on this project together. And at first, of course, I was frightened because she was such, and she is such a star. I think maybe it's just a part of our mentality, or maybe it's just human to be intimidated by someone who's a big star. But I find it very important to, man up and be straightforward, because first of all, it saves a lot of time when you say what you think. And second of all, it gives space for building trust, which is very important. And since we come from various backgrounds in our team, and since we don't work in one organization, for example, right? And we don't have the history of trusting each other. That was not a given. But I think that we stick to this principle to be straightforward, and it helped a lot to be productive. Second of all, and I think this is actually the second part, is to be a professional, because once you give your opinion on something, you have to back it up by your expertise, right? So you cannot just speak out of nowhere. You have to explain why you have such a position and what you're going to do with this. And sometimes I think it was hard for us. We also have a very important person. We had a very important person in our project, Daniela, who was in charge of of working on exercises and putting together all the materials. And I remember how hard it was sometimes for me to stand up and talk about why we should be, for example, why we should cut some expenses, or be brief about some stuff because we had deadlines. And for me as a manager, it was something that I had to do. And it was backed up by my expertise of managing such projects. But again, I think it's important to have your expertise and to be a significant part of the team. And the third thing that I want to talk to you about is about owning your share of responsibilities in projects. Because it was, I don't know if Tammy is going to talk about that a lot, but the deadlines were very tight when we worked on this project, and we didn't have much time for failures and mistakes. And it's important to have time, to have this time, to contemplate and to make a mistake and then, work on it. And we did have mistakes. But it was important that we were able to, I wouldn't say cover for each other, but help each other when we had a problem. And looking back at this project, it lasted for over a year. I have to say that I feel very grateful that I had a chance to be a part of this team and to work with such professionals. And this is my introduction to Tammy's part, and Tammy is going to show you something that is going to convince you that the team was very professional and the result was amazing. Thank you again, and I hope that all of you will have this kind of experience when you work in a cross-cultural international team of professionals, and you can achieve greater results. Thank you.
Dasa, thank you very much for everything. I think you've said quite a lot about the whole process anyway, so this is a good introduction. But I have to say from my, I'm trying to share my screen now, but it seems to be, okay, you see. Probably now you will be able to, can you see my screen now? Sorry about that.
Yes, we do.
Okay, great. So what I wanted to say is that actually for me, it was a great experience. It doesn't matter if I had already authored some books or if I had some experience in different things. That was a very different project, as you said. Many different people were involved from different cultures, from different backgrounds, from different linguistic repertoires, if you want, and from different viewpoints, I would say, methodologically, linguistically, in various areas. However, it was for me, at least, I was so honored and so grateful to have worked with all of you guys. You really worked hard and under very, very pressing deadlines. And Daniela was amazing, but I mean, Dasa, you were a star, really. And I would really like to thank you wholeheartedly here from this point that we've reached finally. I was so looking forward to this conference, and I was so looking forward to do it face to face and meet all of you people who are now watching us from a distance and try to convince you and talk to you about this book and why the research behind it is so important. But I'm very glad that I worked with Dasa. I even said that if we do any other books, if Dasa is not in the team and Daniela are not in the team, I'm not in the team either. So I think that says it all. So I would like to start by saying once again that I feel humbled and honored by this opportunity that I had to be co-author of this textbook. And you will see why we have made certain choices that right now may not seem as obvious as, you know, it would generally be. So this is the book, you know it. We've called the presentation More Than Words because we have emphasized on vocabulary, and I think you will be able to realize it now. What we are trying to introduce, though, is a different approach to material design. So our study here is a study that concerns this book, this newly published book, and it presents a paradigm shift in the development of EFL material for university students. So far, in books that are available and are aimed towards university students, we normally see several texts with some questions, texts that sometimes are not very coherent, or they're not, as much as, they're not tied up so well, I would say. Maybe one has to do with one thematic area, the other has to do with another thematic area. But in general, we don't have a plot. So what we thought of doing is starting a plot for them, because we found that generally, people who follow a plot, any kind of storyline, are much more interested than just doing things more randomly, I would say. So this particular presentation focuses on this course book Skylike A1, A2 level book development. And this was realized as a project in cooperation with Moscow State Pedagogical University, and the people there, my very dear colleagues that I highly appreciate their value in this as well, after a proposal by the Ministry of Education. And the criteria for designing, when we started designing this book, and the innovations that we wanted to bring in this field, was that first, it had to be a research-based book. So whatever vocabulary, structures, lexical chunks, phrases are introduced, they are all done on purpose. There is a rationale behind it. It is also a book that is process-based and meaning-focused rather than just product-based. Of course, we have a product, and the product at the end, we hope, is that the students will be A2 level. But we're also very interested during the tasks and everything that we do in the process. How do these people learn? There is a lot of emphasis, and I think from the tasks you can see it, on communication. But if you look at the texts, you will see that the texts are not what we would call sterile. They are very natural, very normal, as people talk on an everyday basis, not as the usually academic texts that we see. And sometimes they are very far from communication and everyday language. So the language that is introduced in these texts are actually is a language that the students can actually use outside of their classroom. And for us, this is very important. As I said, it is based on a story. There is a company of friends, our gang, and they are doing certain things and they have relationships with each other. And they have all these agonies of young people at that particular age and point of their lives, work-wise, relationship-wise. Everything is on the table. We tried to introduce features of multiple intelligences theory, and actually with its character, we have certain intelligences that are tied to this person, and these people normally introduce certain tasks that relate to these intelligences, and this will give students an opportunity to relate themselves with one or another character. And there are many features of lexical approach that we believe in academia so much, because lexical approach, as I will show you in one slide later, is important for everyday, normal, and fluent or sounding fluent communication. One thing that we have introduced according to the new CFR is the mediation tasks. So throughout the units and throughout the lessons, we have mediation tasks, because generally it is a type of instruction that is not so well known or cultivated, and we're trying to develop it since it is part of the exams in all the new exams that students will take part. We use lexical approach, and we emphasized on the acquisition of lexical chunks, like, for example, guess what, do our best, time to go, because these are just one phrase or one sentence, let's say, that the students, according to research, store as one item. So they don't store the whole do our best, but just like as one. So this really facilitates memorability. They also allow this kind of phrases and lexical chunks. They are acquired easier, but they allow learners to become more fluent, or they sound more fluent. And they use the language without really worrying about the structure. They don't think, oh, which tense do I have to use now? Which syntactical formation? No, it's easy for them. A repertoire of phrases and lexical chunks they can use immediately after they go outside of the classroom. However, we made sure that these vocabulary chunks and lexical chunks that we have are contextualized. So we don't just throw them in the text. They have to be very closely related to our text and plot. And therefore, this contextualization makes it much more easier to remember. And of course, these are both implicitly and explicitly taught. We emphasize a lot on vocabulary, and you will see from the data that I'm going to present to you that we have emphasized a lot on acquiring and making sure that we have a lot of vocabulary, and mainly highly frequent vocabulary. Because, as Henry Sweet said, the greatest problem which a learner faces in learning is actually mastering this huge volume of vocabulary necessary for communication. David Wilkins earlier enough said, without grammar, very little can be conveyed. And this is true. However, without vocabulary, absolutely nothing can be conveyed. Weber Nation more recently said that developing vocabulary provides the necessary foundation for learning any other aspects of language. So we're talking about more than words. We see research, and it indicates that there is a very important link between vocabulary knowledge and reading ability, writing ability, listening, and speaking. And vocabulary is also paramount even when we are starting really, really young. Let's talk about vocabulary science. So we talked about the importance of vocabulary and how it is related to certain language skills. But what does this mean? How much vocabulary? Is there a number? Okay, that's what we are trying to answer here. Now, the breadth of vocabulary, the size of vocabulary, correlates highly with language proficiency. And we know that from experts, academics like James Milton, who is actually a copy editor of this book. And a threshold at 2,000 words provides us about 80% coverage in English when we are, it is a time, let's say, a threshold, a step line, where we can actually start beginning independent communication. But we need 5,000 words, so 95% coverage, if we want to understand a written text. So it's different when we're listening or speaking, but it's much harder, and we need a much larger vocabulary when we are reading or writing something. However, I would say that according to a certain years of research, actually, that ended up to a published paper by James Milton and myself in 2012, if we want our learners to have an A2 level, to reach an A2 level, they would need about 2,500 of the most frequent words in order to start being an independent, let's say, communicator. So this is the good lexical foundation we are striving for, the 2,500 most frequent words. And you will see that frequency in general has become a huge and important and essential, I would say, criterion for selecting appropriate vocabulary in L2 teaching materials. Why? Because frequency is something that we see very often. So we learn a word, we learn a phrase, we learn a lexical chunk, and because we listen to it repeatedly, it's highly frequent, so it comes up. It builds stronger memory traces and therefore helps learnability. Now, let's go to our study now and the book that we've developed. The aim of this study today is to examine the syllabus and lexical items of the course book, therefore setting criteria that render it a useful tool for teaching English to university students. So here we are going to examine the frequency of the vocabulary included in the book by using certain frequency data of different corpora. More specifically, I'm going to show you the overlap between our vocabulary in the book and BNC, COCA, Hindmarsh, and Oxford's list. I'm also going to compare the vocabulary of this book with the English vocabulary profile issued by Cambridge University Press and the several lists. And we are also going to present the structures, chunks, meta discourse elements, and skills included in the book. As you can see, we're trying to compare it with the most standardized and the most valid word lists existing out there. Our research questions: how frequent are the lexical items introduced in the book when it comes to the first 3,000, let's say, most frequent words? Is there an overlap between our vocabulary and English vocabulary profile, EVP, in the separate to list? And what are the structures and meta-discourse elements in the book? To do this, we used, as I said, BNC and COCA, which are based on the British National Corpus. We used English vocabulary profile, a large bank of lexis corresponding to the levels of Common European framework. And these are based on Cambridge Learner Corpus and Cambridge English Corpus. We also used the Separate 2 vocabulary list, which was originally developed by Cambridge English in consultation with external consultants. And for the phrases and lexical chunks that we have introduced, we compared them also with Martinez and Smith's very updated phrase list. In order to do that, we developed really a subcorpus for the course book. So word lists and corpus of phrases and lexical chunks were created, and we used Text Inspector, a very important tool for analysis of our text, but also comparisons with the lists. Let's have a look at the results now. Now, this is first to give you a broad profile of the book. The corpus is 14,204 words in total, everything, names included, everything. The language that we are actually introduced, words, lexical chunks, and phrases, is 1,607. And the words, you can see the numbers of the lexical chunks, the words and phrases as well. Now, this is quite important because we're talking about a very new book, the very first book, okay? And normally we see much less language being introduced in books. So here we have unique words in the figure there in the language. So this is something that looks good, okay? But the most important thing is after, when I show you the list. Now, using, as I said, Text Inspector, we found that in most cases we have flash reading is, which is characterized easy to read, which would be fine. Very easy to read by Gunning Fox. We also have 3 in flash Kincaid grade. And in our list, we also have 3.50 words of academic word list, the overlap, I mean. What does this mean? A, it means that the texts are easy to read. And this was our purpose because they are beginners, they are at the beginning level, so the text should be easy for them. Otherwise, they get really discouraged, they have too many unknown words, then the content and fractional words are difficult, and that would create an issue with comprehension of any text. Now, we have a very small amount of the academic word list, and this again is done on purpose because in order to have a great amount, let's say, or a bigger amount of overlap with the academic word list, your level should be quite high. And at this point, we have a low level. Let's see now what the word lists say. Okay, this is the revelation time, let's say. So let me explain to you what all these percentages mean. I will start with BNC and COCA, with HindMass list and also Oxford A2 and A1 and A2 list. As you will see from the overall vocabulary, the overall lexis that we are introducing, more than the majority of them, more than half of them, okay? So more than 50% in each list coincides with the words that we are introducing. Now, this is very important because we could not have, maybe someone will say, okay, why don't you have 100% words of this word list? Because then we don't actually produce natural language, natural text. They will be very, how would I say, they will sound really unnatural. You also need highly frequent words, but also infrequent words. I'll give you an example. When we're working with young learners textbooks, of course, I take into consideration frequency. So probably when I'm introducing fruit in one unit, I will use apple, okay, which is a very common word, but probably I will refrain from highly infrequent words. But because we are talking about young learners, I will use words such as fairy, elf, I don't know, something else about space, you know, because it is in their world, okay? So it has to be also relevant to their world. In this case, we need a good percentage of highly frequent words actually belonging to the level we are striving for, but we also need some infrequent or some words that are above A2 level. And actually, most of the words after the 57%, 55% belong to the B1 level, which is actually the next level. So we don't have C2 or C1. These are much fewer. The words are much fewer that belong to C1 or C2. But we do have a lot of words belonging to B1 and some also B2. Otherwise, you cannot do scaffolding and you cannot actually build a vocabulary towards, you know, the more advanced level of vocabulary. However, what is, I think, to my mind anyway, quite impressive is that if we merge all this list and we have create a common list from all these lists, actually the merged corpus is 70.90% of our vocabulary that coincide with all of these lists. So 70% of the words that we have in this book belong to all these benzene, cocaine, Mars, Oxford AU1, 2, up to, so the rest of the 30% here is words that belong to B1 and B2 level. Some of them are even unlisted. I think this says the story quite well, so I'm just gonna leave it here. Now, when it comes to EVP, which was our second question, and CFR, you will see two figures here. The first one is A1 and A2 EVP, and you will see that 47% is here. And this is actually quite good, I would say unexpectedly good, because EVP is something that has been created now and includes many different sources. So if half of our vocabulary coincides with the English vocabulary profile, this is really good news. It is at the level that we are hoping to have. But when you see A2 CEFR level, you may think, oh, this is a smaller number. Why? This is because in the list that we have so far, and to my knowledge, we only had the A2, so we can't compare with the A1. Obviously, I would guess, my guess would be that the A1 would be another 20-something%, again, leading us to half of the book at least being EVP and A2 CFR. Here, you can see also the structures and chunks. For example, here are the meta-discourse elements on the left-hand side as you look at the screen. We have certain words, not words here, certain main lexical chunks and phrases, announcing goals, attitude markers, code gloss, emphatic and dophoric, evidential, hedging, you know, oh, well, I don't know, logical connective, so, therefore, you know, person marker, relational marker, sequencing, topics. So all these are just some of the meta-discourse elements that are included in the book. And these make the whole text sound much more natural on an everyday basis. And also K1, K2, K3, K4, and K5, the things that you see there, do actually come from, and you can see that in K1 and K2, for example, and K3, we have larger numbers than K4 and K5 because these are meta-discourse elements that come much later. So we are aiming towards K1 and K2, really, in these first examples. The grammar that is covered, you can see it here, you can see it in the content of the book, is actually, we have consulted the CEFR documents for the grammar that needed to be covered. So this complies and agrees with the CEFR guidelines for up to A2 level. This is the grammar that needed to be covered. And to sum up, because I know that I only have 4 or 5 minutes to finish up and I don't want to take longer, just to sum up and conclude what's happening with this book. This book has a rationale behind it. It is research-based and the results show it. There is a substantial amount of frequent words used. They belong in the 2,000 most frequent words and phrases, and that goes more than 70% because we actually compared it to 2005 100 most frequent words. So we have more than 70% of our words belonging in this category. This high frequency creates utility. So these words and phrases are more likely to be encountered and therefore lead to better comprehension. But to me, an important pedagogical aim here is the feeling of satisfaction that the students will have, which will again lead them to learnability. Also, almost half of the vocabulary items are common in Skylike and EVP. And therefore, we seem to have an appropriate balance between frequent and infrequent words, of course, with emphasis on the most frequent for all the reasons that I explained before. But we don't just have frequent words, we have a good start on the less frequent words, which learners actually need if we want them to grow a big second language vocabulary. I think up to now, we have a good idea of the profile of the book and what is included. But I think it would also be interesting to perform similar studies with other existing books for these levels in Russia to see if they meet these criteria and standards, and to see whether in this way we can present the book as a paradigm shift for developing textbooks for university students. I'm personally very interested in the results of this. And I have a scientific research in this, an interest in this. And so I would be thrilled to know more about how the book is going and what the teachers who use it think of the book. I always say that any book can be magic book, like the magic books we've created here in Greece. But in the hands of a good teacher, it can either be a magic book or a tragic book. So I believe in the power of educators that are going to really put magic on this book. And of course, I'm very, very interested personally in seeing how our students, your students in Russia, will, what they will consider regarding this book, if they will embrace it, if they will like it, what they think about it, and how useful they will find the language that we are trying to armor them with. So this is it from me. And once again, let me tell you that I'm really honored and happy to be here. And I thank you all very much for your attention.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Dr. Alexiou. There were two questions that the listeners would like you to answer. Question number one, how do you motivate your cross-cultural students?
Is it a question for Dasha, you said, or for me?
Yes. Well, that was one of the questions which was posted during your presentation.
Okay, it doesn't matter. I can, Daria, can I answer this?
Yes, absolutely. I saw the question, and since it was about the students and you have most experience with that, I thought that this question was for you.
Okay, great. When it comes to cross-cultural students, we are, I think this is an excellent question, actually, because it opens up all the windows in this, again, the new CFR. The new CFR actually emphasizes on cross-cultural abilities and the development of an intercultural competence in the teachers. And I think we all need a little bit of that. We need a bit of training in that. In Greece, it was a new situation, but we are trying to do it as well. I think we need to make sure that we are taking advantage of the different cultures of our students. Now, in an adult situation, because these are all adults, it's even easier to do. What is harder to do is to introduce it when they're young, the learners are very young and they don't have the background. When they are older, I think everybody is so excited about and so interested in different cultures, in traveling, in getting to know different customs. So I think introducing projects would be a good idea on cross-cultural customs or any kind of ideas that these other students have. I would also go even beyond that and say that the mediation tasks will help them a lot and will include them a lot, because you can use mediation with any kind of language. You see, you are the mediator of any other language, so you can bring in realia and different texts or posters or whatever from different languages and introduce this language in the classroom, in the university classroom as well. Now, regarding methods of assessment, I'm not sure if the colleague here is referring to the particular book or generally, how do you assess cross-cultural students? I'm not sure. But if
no, I think that's a separate question, and it's probably focused on the book. So what methods of assessment do you use in this textbook?
I think the whole, one thing that probably I forgot to mention, and this is a good opportunity to mention it, is that we made sure many of these words and chunks that are actually presented for the very first time are then repeated throughout the book. Now, this is important because we want them to have all this language. We want to have this language from short-term memory to long-term memory. And this is one way of doing it. I think the projects that we have at the very end, or the challenges as we call them, is one way of assessing comprehension of the units, the texts, the lessons, everything that we've included.
Okay, thank you so much. And I'd like to read out a comment posted by Aishat Dekusheva. Thanks to Skyeng supporting free trial in June, I had a great opportunity to use the coursebook in my lessons with my students of A1 level, and I really enjoyed it.
Oh,
so,
I'm happy to hear that. I'm really happy to hear that.
Yeah, so a big thank you goes to the authors. And basically, this concludes track 1 of our conference. And I'd like to remind to all our viewers that if you'd like a chance to get a free book, or rather a free copy of this textbook that the author has been telling you about, feel free to follow the link, which is right underneath the video. And if you follow the link and fill in the Google form, and all you need to write there is just your name and your surname and the name of the institute you're working for, the institute of the university, you will become a participant of a raffle. And the random number generator will help us to choose 3 persons who will get free copies of this textbook. Thank you so much. This is the end of track 1. And if you have further questions or comments, please feel free to write them in the chat underneath the video, and we'll collect those questions and we will try to answer them and get in touch with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, shall I continue with the second track now? Okay, great. So I'm very happy now to be chairing this next session. And we have 2 excellent speakers with us that I'm very happy to introduce. So first, we are going to start with a very important area of research, which is independent learning. And I can see that Mihaela Dascalu is going to talk to us about independent learning, a necessary, desirable, and achievable goal. I absolutely agree that this is everything that you're mentioning. I believe very much in independent learning. And let me just introduce you, Mihaela Dascalu. She's a senior teacher trainer and educator on INTESOL worldwide. She's a former faculty member at Zayed University, Academic Bridge Program Department, and Psychosociology and Culture in Education. I had the pleasure of being in Zayed University many times. I don't know if we've ever met, but it's a pleasure to have you here with us today. We can't hear you, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can hear you.
So, hello everybody, good evening. Dobry večer, kalispera, in all our languages.
Oh my
I can
God.
think, yes, and thank you for making me part of this fantastic conference so far. I've been attending like 2 sessions so far, and really you raised the ball at the net for me with independent learning now. So yes, this is my presentation tonight, and hopefully I get the 20 minutes. So independent learning, a desirable, necessary, and hopefully achievable goal. So what is happening is that what I noticed is that the university students are not always up to par as far as our expectations of them are concerned in terms of attitude, in terms of what they have to do. So we usually complain somehow about them. They are not self-reliant, that they plagiarize, that they don't think critically, they, they don't manage their time, and so on and so forth. So basically, it's not their fault in a way. So we expect them to come from high school directly to university doing this. And this doesn't happen overnight. It cannot. So these independent learning skills need to be taught from day one in primary school when they get into formal education. Students who have the families educated and they have a very intellectual background with libraries and things in the house, they are more fortunate. But the schools, as far as I know them, and I've been a teacher for 39 years now in schools and universities, language teacher, I realized that it doesn't happen really. So the students have to find their own way, and most of them are losing their way in the process. Now, not to mention the pandemic now that absolutely requires the students and all levels to become more independent. They cannot rely on teacher all the time because of the situation. Now, so one of my favorite quotations I want to start with is this: what does it mean to be a successful teacher? And the greatest sign of a successful teacher is to be able to say that the children are working now as if I did not exist. Basically, the children, students working on their own and doing the job without us controlling them all the time. The outline, a definition, a portrait of what an independent learner is. Very important. I refer to cultural dimension influencing learning independence, and thank you again for your presentation before, because it lit the path. And just briefly, 3 approaches. We won't have time to go into each and every one of them, but this is how it happens. So let's get started. What independent learning is, as Candy Philip put it very clearly, is a process or a method or a philosophy, basically, of education whereby a learner acquires knowledge independently, working and taking responsibility through inquiry and doing critical evaluation. So basically, this should be the aim of education and educating students in schools. I'm a teacher of English, so everything is in English, but it can be translated and used in any other language. So what do we want for our students? So I found a portrait of the learner of the 21st century. And there are 4 components. 3 are the main ones, and the last one actually is also very important. The knowledge, we won't question that. What the subjects they need to learn in school according to the curriculum and so on. Also the knowledge they want to learn on their own. Then there are the skills of the 21st century, which are the 4+2 skills. And the students need to be creative, use critical thinking skills, communicating properly and effectively, and collaborating with others. Collaborating and not, I cannot find another word for collaboration in a negative sense. Plus, the choice. Without choice, it's for the students to choose how to learn, basically, not what to learn, because this is usually given. And lots of care, the care for the subject, the care for their own learning. And let me stop here because we'll talk more about it. And then there are traits of character. So the students need to form, so we as educators need to form the characters, the character of the students. Lots of them come to school having them in different degrees, but it is important for us to educate them, to train them into this, and there are ways of doing this. And one is to maintain that curiosity. The students seem to have lost it on the way since they were children, to bring it back. And resilience and leadership, we are talking a lot. And now talking about your book that I just heard, it's this meta learning, how we reflect and adapt, how we learn, and how we learn from our mistakes and from the feedback from the teachers and from the world around us, think and solve our own learning problems. I mean, the learners are students and teachers, so yeah, both. Yes, and adapt to changes like these ones more easily. Now, there is a lot of text here. I'm not going to read it out loud for you. So this is what independent learners should be doing. And we are talking about complaints about them. Oh, they are not organized. They are not motivated. They are always stressed. And they are upset all the time with us, with the materials. It's too much, and so on and so forth. Now, on the other side is, if we want this kind of learners, the teacher has to change attitude, or I'm not saying has to change, most of us maybe are, but to allow this to happen, to allow independent learners to learn independently, or I'm not saying chaotically, I'm just saying under guidance. The teacher of independent learners need to use certain skills while teaching. So the teacher is no more the guru of knowing it all and feeding the students, and the students have to obey, but they are more nurturing and letting go of control at all times, because we really have teachers control issues from our education or from our cultures. And change the setting of the room by just removing ourselves from the center. We need to be there in the center at times, but not all the time. Yeah, it's kind of uncomfortable for some. Okay, so this is basically what a teacher of independent learners should be doing. Maybe there is more, but these are the most important thing. Feedback, not marking. Marking is not the same with feedback. And listening actively to the students while doing feedback and helping them set goals. Okay, let's move on to something, it's not different, but I need to stress this. We are all, we belong to different cultures. And I just want very quickly to present some cultural dimensions studied very profoundly by Hofstede. And these are the 6 dimensions of our cultural profiles. So basically, these are the preferences that we as members of a culture have while dealing with our daily affairs and at work and at school. And it's what brings us together as a culture, and rather than individuals. Of course, there are idiosyncrasies. So I want you just to have like 1 minute, please look at this chart. I chose Greece, I chose Romania, Russia, United Kingdom. The website put it in alphabetical order. So I'd like you to have a look at these dimensions in power distance, see similarities and differences between countries and nations. Studied, I gave you, I will give you a link to this and to see how the study went, because we are all research based. So it's not, it is an estimate, but you see how that happens. With uncertainty avoidance, I don't know why Greece is 100, but anyways, it's just food for thought. So having this into consideration, let's have a look at what these mean. I'm going just to refer to power distance and masculinity versus femininity and uncertainty avoidance. The definitions are there. Power distance basically deals with the hierarchy of power in terms of a teacher, institution, parent, child, who is more powerful in terms of age, profession, social status, and so on. So in high power distance cultures, the learning depends on the teacher. It's more teacher-centered. It is the way we learn. We're really striving to change that, but it's somewhere there in the subconscious. In a low power distance like Greece or northern countries, it's more student centered, and the students are educated for independence. As far as masculinity versus femininity is basically who takes the decisions, which is very much connected with power distance. Masculine societies are very strong oriented, they are assertive, they are the decision making comes from top down. So as far as education, the academic reputation in masculine society is the most important thing. So we have all to be doctors, we have to be that. If we are not this, we are maybe questionable in terms of our expertise. Whereas the other, the feminine society do not put so much emphasis on this kind of status. I mean, you are professional, but it doesn't have really to be. It's important what you do and how you behave and the relationships you form. And uncertainty avoidance, because we are language teachers and our learning is not a given, you know, we doubt ourselves, it's hard, so there is a lot of struggle there. So what it means for us, it's about how a culture feels threatened by the unknown, or like a crisis, or something that is not set in stone, and you know, like it's out of the routine, out of our comfort zone. So high uncertainty avoidance cultures are very structured. Accuracy is more important than fluency in language, and so on. Or the teacher is always this, the expert. We go there for checking our answers, and that's what the teacher says is carved in stone. Very formal, sir, madam, and so on. On the other hand of the spectrum, the low avoidance index cultures are less structures. The teacher is guide and as a guide, and the teacher is okay if he says or she, I don't know, I'll go and check. You won't lose face. So we are all somewhere in between these in our cultures. And what does it mean for us? So we want independent students. We try to educate ourselves to allow that to happen, but at the same time, our cultural program, in a way, to some extent, more or less, could enhance or could detract. What is the English word? could enhance or impede the learning of these skills and allowing this to happen. So I have turned this around. I heard it on somebody was saying it, and I really thought it's more wise to say that we need to think locally, to think as us, as global citizens, but with our national identity. And if we have to question some beliefs, we question them. And if we want to change them, it's only up to us to do that, so that we can allow this to happen. And act globally, I mean, behave globally as global citizens with our identity, but accepting and respecting the others for their diversity. Now, I have exactly 5 minutes. Just to go very quickly through just 3 ways of encouraging students to be more independent. These are just techniques or strategies. One is learning to learn, the metacognition, which means that we need to train the students to think about their own learning, set goals for themselves if they feel they need to set their own goals, or they can get the goals from our learning objectives or from the curriculum objectives. Students, here is where you have to get. Then break it down and see what we can do about it. So, for example, an area that I need to improve, an example is spelling. How do I know I have a problem? Maybe I don't. So talk to the teacher, set the goal, choose the strategies, also with the guidance of the teacher, because it's very hard for them to do that. Set a time limit and check how would I know what are the signs of my learning. This ties up into the reflective learning. I just put it, Gibbs reflective learning cycle that goes with experiential learning as well. I have a problem, describe what happened, how I felt when that happened. Usually it's a negative one that makes me doubt that something was okay, was not. What was good, what was bad about this experience? What exactly was bad, and reflect on not reflect, just evaluate it, analyze what else I could have made, I could have done, and set an action plan. So if I could have done something else, I will apply this for another situation, a similar one, when I need to use that kind of that skill that I did not master before, or whatever. This can go, we had it at Zayed University. We kind of forced our students to do that. So they had to do it, and we had criteria for that. So we encouraged them to reflect deeply. It was so hard to talk about their feelings. It was like pulling teeth, but slowly, they managed to go deeper and deeper, and then it was like second nature to their thinking. So the aim is here, the format they can use is handwritten, use Penzu. There are so many nicer ones. If they want to share it with the teacher, would be nice or with students. There is a template here. I don't know if this PowerPoint could be shared, or this is for a university student, reflective learning diary template. It's the what, describe the reaction, my reaction to it, feelings, why, what I learned from this, and set future goals. And then project-based learning. Of course, it's it's a way of assessment, but it's the best way the students can show how they can learn independently under guidance and under direct rules. So we have to consider lots of stuff when we start a project, the idea from the students, from us, how long it will take, working with language, if it's manageable, if more subjects can be brought in, and the stages of the projects, identify topic and question the students wanted or the teacher, break it down into manageable steps, plan everything, divide the class into groups. Usually group projects have to be small group projects where they collaborate. They work on different stages, and then they have to have a tangible outcome, and something they should show, artifact or something, and arrive at a conclusion. Could be anything. We just did a skit, for example, when I was doing the master's. We had to do a scene where I was the critical thinker, and another one was the performing self. So we had to act it out. And then document and present to an audience not only the project itself, but how they worked together, the highs and the lows, and share it with everybody else. And the assessment, if to have a clear assessment criteria by the students or created with the help of the students for possible marking. Or, well, for the little ones, we have to do. But of course, the students need to be checked. So this is what we take with us as far as independent learning is concerned. Choice, collaboration, communication, critical thinking, creativity. They are all in human nature, but somehow we lose it on the way. Through formal education, we need to train the students sensibly and sensitively, systematically throughout their school years. Also at the university, oh, I'm done. Just I wanted to say that at university, I feel that in Romanian universities, we need a course in the first year for the students to learn how to be a student, and in the independent learning should be there, like a semester course, maybe without credits or something, or some credit, to learn how to do bibliography, how to do research, what is plagiarism, and all that stuff that they don't really know how to do. Thank you. We're here.
Thank you very much. I think you mentioned and you actually pinpointed very important aspects and how to develop independence, which is essential nowadays. I think you had plenty of time, so you didn't need to worry.
Oh.
Yeah, because that was okay. But I do see some questions in the chat.
Can you tell me how much time we have so I know how to?
I think we started a bit earlier, but my understanding was that you were supposed to, you had about 10 more minutes or something.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Maybe it's better to answer questions, and I could add anything I left out. Yeah, okay.
We asked you to start earlier. That's all. That's why it all happened. But that's okay. It's quite understandable. So we have some questions. Let me ask you then. Well, can a learner stay completely independent, or some kind of teacher's control is still necessary? And how frequent a control should be?
Well, that's the essential question, isn't it? Because independent learning is not just allowing the students to do whatever they want. Yes, the teacher is a mentor and is a guide and needs to be with the students all most of the time when needed, or when the teacher decides that that student or group of students needs a guidance. And basically what I want this guidance comes also from feedback. We need to learn how to give constructive feedback and to train the students to accept it without being upset and without going with very high negative emotions right there. So we are a friend that gives feedback for them to improve their performance, to help them set their own goals and pursue them. And we can check where they are on that way once in a while. I don't know how often, but usually if you, from my experience, if you tell the students, like the learner journal, I say, oh, you don't need to show it me, only if you want to. Of course, there is confidentiality. I'm not going to share it with anyone. And so if you want to do this, just send it to me on our learning platform. We had a message there. We used Schoology at the time. And leave it there, or if it's written, and they all chose to handwrite it in the end, just because they felt it's more personal. Which was really interesting that it was their choice.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also the cultural background. The cultural background can be a factor while we're trying to give constructive feedback, because I know that for certain cultures would feel a bit intimidated when the teacher corrects them, depending on how they do it, of course. And other cultures may be a bit more relaxed in the way they receive feedback. So I think this is one parameter that the
It's
teacher
true.
takes.
This is what I was teaching in the Arab Emirates. That is a high power distance culture and very collectivist society. So being a collectivist society, the students feel like they are a member of the group, and if any criticism given to them individually, it has, well, of course it has to be separate from the others, not in front of the others, but they were not comfortable to talk about their feelings, and it was very hard for them to not to take the feedback. They wanted more feedback. They wanted, tell me where I was wrong, and instead of telling them where I was wrong, what do you think should go here? So trying to elicit that. That
Yes,
was no miss, just tell me.
They want more spoon feeding in a way, as I understand.
Exactly. So this is where training is necessary, but step by step and with patience.
We have one more question, actually two. One is, can feedback be always positive?
Feedback is always possible. It depends on how we do it.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
It's in a class after an activity or in a tutorial, or the teacher, the student comes to the teacher in the hallways and say, well, can we sit and just talk about this? So the feedback is always, if a student doesn't ask for feedback, then I used to call them and I say, well, we need to talk a little bit. Would you be so kind, with a smile on my face and being, okay.
Okay, and one more question. I think the colleague here is referring probably to your chart when you showed us different countries and the chart. And she is asking, how was this estimation carried out?
Oh, right. I cannot, the study was done in different stages by Hofstede, while he was working. He's a sociologist, and he worked for one of these big American companies that, was global at the time in the 60s, 70s. And then he went on studying this with a team of researchers. And I think he conducted the study in 40 countries at the time, and with over 270,000 subjects, quite extensive. And then it was carried on and continued, not separately actually, by what's his name, Makarov, a Bulgarian sociologist, that added to this. Actually, he added the sixth dimension that I can give you, there is a Hofstede, on one of my slides, there must be the source of that, and that website has all this information, how the research was conducted and what they do, and there are more details there about that. Of course, nobody should take it personally. We are all like global citizens. We went to training in the States, but sometimes we brought approaches and we brought things from outside the Western cultures into our cultures, and didn't really work. So we had to find another way, because those have value. But how can you bring that value down there in the classroom where students have parents and other cultures?
Yes, of course. No, absolutely. Thank you very much for this very enlightening talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you. See you another time. Yes. And good luck for the next speakers.
Okay. So we move on to our next speaker. Mr. Anton Makarov, is that correct? I hope the name is correct.
Yes, you're right.
He's
Thank
the
you
head
very
of
much.
teachers recruitment at Skyeng, so a very busy man, I guess. And he's going to talk to us about learning through play, cultural and methodological issues. It's great. We have a lot of gaming in these presentations today, which is great. We're looking forward to listening to your talk.
Yeah, I hope you see my screen, because I see it, and I hope everyone does.
Yes.
Yes, great. Okay, well, what we have to say, it's not only me, it's me and Yulia Kovalenko, my co-author. She's not here today, but she helped a lot with the presentation and the speech. So the topic is learning through play, cultural and methodological issues. Quite complicated. Over the last years, we didn't see, and I hope we didn't read, a lot of articles and works concerned with the need or advantages or opportunities of implementation of the game-based learning. And those that were published are rather insignificant and generally reflect already developed and well-known techniques. Anyway, it is, I think, required to define the meaning of a didactic game. Yeah, a great question here. The word didactic actually is clear enough. Didactic in terms of game means something used to teach certain skills and to acquire competences and sub-competences. In our case, while teaching communicative competence along with its 4 language skills, speaking, writing, reading, listening, and 2.5 of aspects of language or language systems. I mean, grammar, lexis, and pronunciation. The word game is not all that simple. That's a challenging and almost important, almost impossible task to identify game. One of the researchers, Tamara Antonovna Apinyan, states that an exact definition and delimitation of game in a wide range of human and animal activities is impossible, and all kinds of searches of the definitions should be qualified as scientific games played by authors themselves. And therefore, she herself gives a rather circular definition. Game is a strategic behavior following an expected outcome. However, we should remember this definition foregrounding the pragmatic aspect of the game. A similar epistemic, let's call it like with a cool word, epistemic doubt, was expressed by another researcher, Larissa Rytunskih, Russian one. The meaning of the concept game is hard to verbalize. At the same time, game as a cultural phenomenon has one feature noted by almost all authors: its two-dimensionality. The game world exists in a supplementary mode, if we can say, in respect of reality par excellence. Here is an allusion to a very famous Spanish writer and philosopher Ortega y Gasset and his genius book La Rebelión de las Masas. Moreover, the game world for the short period of time substitutes the real one. An example we should have here, I think. Here we can see a well-known game, yeah? But what's a football player's main aim on a pitch, yeah? From the point of view of a person who is unaware of such a traditional, culturally embedded game as football. The man, here is Alexander Golovin, very famous Russian football player, plays for AS Monaco. He tries to hit a ball-shaped object into the space bounded by 2 crossbars and a horizontal bar. In general, it's a rather stupid action. Thousands of people at the stadium seem even more stupid when cheering up or crying their hearts out, depending on whether the ball was hit, wasn't hit into the left or right gates. Do you remember your emotions when you saw curling for the first time? One cannot imagine a more weird game where athletes use the mops to sweep the ice surface in the path of the rolling stone. I don't know exactly what the name of this stone for curling. I'm sorry for that. We didn't see this game before, didn't know the discourse for the reason it seemed initially so unusual. A sense of otherness in the game is overlaid on the everyday being and temporarily replaces it in a certain conventional, that's important, it's conventional game space. At the same time, game goals and objectives are not often correlated with non-game ones and can hardly be turned into reality from time to time. Two-dimensional world means two-dimensional goals. To score more goals is a game objective. To win, to lead, means to gain respect, money, and admiration, maybe. And this makes a very real goal in terms of reality par excellence. Namely, this feature, the two-dimensionality of the goal, will be principal or, I don't know what to say, constitutive. A didactic game has two goals. The game goal the student is striving for in the game, and the learning goal, the knowledge and intellectual abilities the student should learn. Yeah, but anyway, we still don't understand what is game and what is not. That is also quite important. Yeah, talking about levels. When what are the features of the game? We know about two-dimensionality should be included in the definition. Game consists of the following levels: empirical, existential, and communicative. The empirical being in the sum of relatively constant social and cultural formations that the name of the game is traditionally assigned to. In other words, the empirical level is a formal level. Basing on this level, we might detect game as a phenomenon. There is a number of formal features listed, so I don't think we need to focus on it. It's very simple. It's rules, certain conditions of place, time, attributes, toys, self-focused. We have subject, object, and toys, and so on. The existential level is associated with a set of feelings, thoughts, and emotional experience, evaluating a certain moment of being as a game, which provides the game with an interpretive reality. As a result, the existential features of the game determine the presence or absence of the game reality. Here we have a list of some features, like very important are, for example, the presence of a fantasy. The experience of the game is free being, and interest, which is quite important because without it we can't define any event as a game. Finally, the communicative level is highlighted due to the fact that the game reality is communicative in its content, meaning and functions. Communication is a necessary condition for the development of game process. The game relations are realized through the communicative level. This level does not have any clear features. However, it's possible to state that the game communication is, let's say, self-sufficient. and completely determined by the game situation representing the communication game process. Communication in the game is one of the means of the game activity realization. So communication in the game is very, very, very important. So what is a didactic game? Sorry, I missed an article. So stupid. How stupid am I? A didactic game is a way of behaving within a learning situation characterized by a conventional doubling of reality and consequently by double goal settings, prioritizing the interests and limited by the predetermined formal features or rules. So very important things here. So it's a way of behaving. First, it's conventional, two-dimensional in terms of goals, and there are some formal features. We play a didactic game if the task has two goals, if there are rules indicated and known to the players, and if the game goal is interesting enough for the players to accept the rules. So very simple conditions. But next question we have here, and the main question of the speech today, is how to classify games. Maybe we can do it according to the type of language activity. And so what about, for example, text activities? For example, we've prepared an interview with a non-native English-speaking celebrity, for example, a sportsman. We found a video and made a script of it. Our lesson objective, lesson goal is to drill some grammatical structures, for example, false collocations. And what type of activity it belongs to: listening or reading, if there is a script, grammar or vocabulary, because we're talking about collocations and collocations altogether. Well, not very nice idea. According to the usage and not usage of game objects, well, it was a traditional way to classify games. Well, in the previous epoch, before the internet and online learning, so it doesn't fit. Maybe according to the place in the lesson plan. Well, yeah, for example, warm-up, cool-down games, activities to know each other better, games for presentation of vocabulary or grammar. Well, might be, but anyway, we don't have a lot of stages in the lesson that are I don't know, that have a special place in the beginning or in the end. So we can classify a few games, but the biggest part will be unclassified. So it's not the best idea as well. What we're going to do? We need to answer the question. Well, in Skyeng, we have a lot of lazy people. Lazy people are very creative. That's why the first question we used to answer is, what problem should be solved? And indeed, is there any pragmatic purpose in the classification development? Moreover, it is difficult to choose a unique basis for it. We have already talked about. The basis will cause discussions, and it seems that no unambiguous model can be built. Although you can develop a beautiful one, and there are many talented authors who are successfully doing this, but unambiguous, that's a challenge. But anyway, we need to do something with it. And without a visual model, it will be hard to move on. That's why the model finally will appear, and you can see it on your screens, I hope. This model is very simple. The vertical axis shows the didactic tasks. The list of topics in the model is taken from the first lessons of the general intermediate course on the Winbox platform of this kind. For example, the horizontal axis is the applicability of the tasks. Very controversial classification, I know it, but anyway. There are only 3 items: drilling tasks, text-based task, for example, both for reading or for listening, and task based on frameworks. Actually, the matrix of game tasks could be organized like that. Personally, I consider this classification is quite practical. Moreover, along the vertical axis, the list of topics can go into infinity. But well, we did the research, and I guess that infinity ends somewhere on line 450. The horizontal axis, in general, could be changed as you wish. But in terms of pragmatics, the matrix is sufficient to create and apply game tasks. Detailed classification, or even worse, taxonomies, will not be required for the current teacher. So teachers don't need classifications. They need a model to work with it. And I believe that we're limited in time to discuss drills and text-based tasks, for example. So I would like to say a few words about tasks based on frameworks. So when and why we can use it, and what does it mean, tasks based on framework models. The model is a simplified scheme of reality. This alone is already sufficient in itself to use such verbal cases as comments, expression of agreement, clarification, criticism, etc. In general, it gives the green light for communication about the model as such. So first we can discuss a model, any model you can. So for example, BCG matrix, or I don't know, Bloom's taxonomy. It's quite difficult to discuss for students. It might be, but anyway. The matrix of Eisenhower, you know, the president, like delegate, well, what is urgent and important, not urgent but important, and so on. The models like this, I mean. These models are visual. Models like tables and or theories might be a model as well. They don't work because you need a structure, and visual aid is essential. That's very important. It should be visual. You should work with some structure, and this structure, and you should see the structure, and you should do something with the structure. You should be able to do something, let's say like that. And they are, well, relatively multi-purpose. They can be packed with different content that is especially valuable for teaching a non-native language. For example, there is a very famous model of Esquire, I think, Esquire magazine. The model is about presents you should give to different people, depends on the age, time, and so on. So, and how much money you can spend on the present. That's quite interesting. So it's easy to transpose this model, well, incorporate this model into the life of a student, and that's why it might be effective to use it during the lesson. Here, well, I hope that the presentation, this presentation, our participants can well, can use this, can see, can, I don't know, click this presentation, because links here are clickable, and you can click any link here and see what do I mean if I'm not very and probably it is. I'm not very clearly saying. Well, the conclusion here is no classification, no problem, and the idea to classify games is a bad idea in my opinion, because teachers, as I already said, don't need any classifications. They need models to work with. And having the matrix is a model to work with. So you can have a lot of tasks, ideas inside. That's a privilege to work. So yes, I believe that I have to stop here, and will be glad to answer the questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation that you presented and your colleague as well helped with. We have one question, as I can see from the chat here. And the question is, can role plays be given as assessment tasks? And if so, what are the criteria?
Well, it's an interesting question. I don't like role plays, actually, because to make it interesting, it takes a lot of time to organize it well. Because if you just give roles and say you're a client, I'm I don't know, I'm a waiter. Let's talk. That's dull. That's not interesting at all. And playing dialogues is also, well, it is effective. Yes, I know, and there are some researchers that prove that this way of learning is quite effective, but that's dull. So because of my personal attitude to this kind of game, I wouldn't say that it's a good idea to use role play as anything, not just assessment. But it is possible. For example, well, you can give roles, but not very determined roles. For example, you're going to be a Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson. What am I saying? You're going to be, for example, Boris Johnson. You're Sir Lancelot. You're Christina Aguilera, and let's build a discussion. And you give some rules, you give some guidance to your students, and the idea of a task for them would be to pretend they are from America, from France, from England, to copy the accent, and they will focus on it. Meanwhile, you can assess them. So they will have fun, you will assess them. It might work, yes. But role plays it's difficult to organize, very difficult. So I wouldn't recommend it.
It also depends, of course, on the age, don't you think?
Yes, of course.
Role plays with young learners are very popular, yes. So it largely depends on your audience as well. But yeah, thank you very much. The way I see it also, and from your presentation, what I understand is we want more involvement, and role play is a bit more passive. Mm-hmm. So yeah, and if we want real interaction and more natural interaction, obviously we wouldn't probably choose role plays as the best assessment methods. Maybe on a formative scale, we would use them during the class. The teachers would use them during the class at certain points, but definitely not as summative assessment. There's another question here. Do you agree that there are games for most language learning objectives, better than just classifying them?
there are games for Morse language learning. It's when we want to, that's anyway, it's a classification. So the basis of classification might be learning objectives. Yes, it might be, but it's really hard to classify the massive of all games. We will have some unclassified. That's the problem of all classifications and taxonomies, all of them. Even I don't know, the taxonomy of species is very well. Even here we have some problems. I don't know the. I can't understand the aim of classification itself. So we are going to do that. Why? Why? Okay. Well, we will have the classification, a beautiful one, but why? When we are going to need to use it? To write an article in a very popular, I don't know, somewhere to be famous. Well, maybe, but
yeah, I think it depends on the teacher, and I think we have a similar point here by Evgenia Zayetseva, that it depends on the teacher to adapt different types of game to different topics and situations. And if a game is very well described, then you know this, the criteria, and you can filter out which ones you need for what you're doing in your classroom, I'm guessing, yeah?
Yes, exactly. Evgeny is right. I love this this statement. You need to know the structure of a game. You need to know some structures that are assigned as games, that are well known as games, and you need to have an ability to adjust. That's it. That's enough.
Yeah. Okay. I think we don't have any more comments. I don't know if there are any more questions. So I would like to thank you for your talk and for answering these questions. I think this is the end of track 2. And I guess we will all see you tomorrow. And I hope you have a lovely evening. And I do hope that these presentations were useful to you and interesting. So we are looking forward to seeing you tomorrow as well. Thank you very much for attending this.
Thank you very much.
I think we're done here. I'm not sure what else.